Hello. In this video we're going to look at the process of registering a patient on Dawn. Now the most common scenario is that your Dawn system will be interfaced with your patient administration system or electronic patient record. In that case, the interface will actually create the patient record with all the patient demographics in, and all that you're going to do is add the clinical information about their course of therapy and activate their treatment plan. So that's the scenario we'll look at first, and then later we'll look at how you add a patient from scratch should you ever need to. To begin with then, we're going to assume you have the name and contact details of a patient who has just been registered on your patient administration system with the rheumatology clinic. That will have triggered an update to Dawn via the interface. So what we need to do is find that patient, input their therapy details and create their first test date. So what I do is go to the patient menu and search for the patient. And I found his record here, so I open that, and what I can see is there's no therapy information showing, no first visit, and no drug information. The treatment plan status is also showing as new and not active. So those are the areas I need to complete. And I start by clicking the treatment plan link that you find here in the top left hand quadrant. That opens the treatment plan form, and here I can add a diagnosis record, and I can search by typing a bit of text or whatever. I can adjust the date, perhaps it was diagnosed at the beginning of the month. Click OK, and that's the diagnosis in. The start date defaults to today. If they're actually starting treatment next week, or if they started a week ago or even a month ago, I can change that. I'm going to just leave that as it is. If they're on indefinite treatment, you don't need to enter a duration. Now, it may be that you have clinics set up as a way of dividing your patients into different cohorts, possibly by something clinical, early arthritis perhaps, or possibly if you're going to hand this patient's monitoring over to the GP, they'll go into a shared care clinic. You can have clinics for physical locations where they have their phlebotomy done, for different clinical groups, whatever makes sense to you. You can also not use clinics at all if you don't need them. So I'm going to leave that blank, but if you're using clinics, you would select their clinic at this point. Next, I select the therapy template. Therapy templates control which tests we are monitoring and which phases of treatment we can select from. The primary purpose of phases are to define normal testing intervals. So ordinarily you will have several phases, perhaps a kind of titration phase where you see the patient every 2 weeks, and then you'll move up to an initial monitoring phase where you see them perhaps every 4 weeks. After that you may have 1 or 2 further monitoring phases where you see them at 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Phases can also define additional tests that are needed at that stage of treatment. To keep things simple, we have 2 prime ones. There's the BSR monitoring, which embodies the BSR guidelines for DMARD drugs, and we have a more generic biologics DMARD monitoring option too. Both are similar. This one has some drug-specific phases that, for things like leflunomide or gold, that you can choose if the patient is on that particular drug. This one is much more generic in what it does. You'll notice this phase 2, manual review only. What that does is ensure that that patient, any patients on that therapy template, are never automatically moved to their next appointment by Dawn. The settings are the same as the BSL monitoring. The only difference is these patients can be moved automatically to their next appointment if all their tests are in range. These patients must always be looked at by a healthcare professional. So in that sense, it works in a very similar way to the watchful wait risk class that we've looked at before. The only difference is with the watchful wait, you can switch them on or off watchful wait at different periods. With the therapy template, if they're on that therapy template, they will never be moved to their next appointment automatically. So I'm going to choose the BSL monitoring, and if you are using reference ranges, you can choose the reference range at this point. Reference ranges can be used to override the default settings for tests. So if you have test limits that are different for a particular group of patients, perhaps female patients or patients on a particular therapy, you can set up overrides for the default normal range limits. But that's something we will look at further in a subsequent video. Next, I will go to the referral tab. I can see the interface has actually populated the GP, but I might want to fill in the consultant so that my list views and things where I want to sort patients by which consultant they see will work and allow me to do that. So at this point, I have everything I need in terms of the treatment plan. So the final step here is to activate it so that Dawn knows this patient is now being actively monitored. And I do that by pressing the activate button. Dawn pops up a confirmatory message, just confirming that I've started them on a 2-week interval and prompting me to create the first appointment. So really that will be the next step. And to do that, we can close the treatment plan tab, and we can see here in the rheumatology tab or the interventions tab, whichever one you have selected, we can create the next appointment. Now, if we're doing baseline tests today, we probably want those results showing in Dawn. So I'll just put today's date and press create. And Dawn will set up that first appointment with that first set of tests that we need results for. And there we have it. There's the visit set up, ready for that first set of results. So we have the GP and we've added the consultant. I can see them there on the contacts tab. We have the first appointment set up, and we have the therapy template, and we have the treatment plan active. The one thing that we haven't done is say which medication this patient is on. So the final step is to go to the drugs tab and press the add drug button, and I can search for the drug that I'm interested in, and they're starting that today. I can put in the dose and the frequency and OK that, and that now appears in their drug list. It will also show here, and of course on the rheumatology tab I can see the details of the dose, frequency and start date. If they're on combination therapy, I can add an additional drug. So I can either go back to the drugs tab, or if I'm on the rheumatology tab, I can do it directly from here by pressing this drug button, and I can search again by typing the name of the drug I'm interested in. The start date in this case will be the same, and that's going to be once a week. And again I can press OK, and now I have the details of both drugs showing there and summarised over here. So that patient is now ready to receive their first set of test results. And that is how I would activate and start a patient which my patient administration system and interface has inserted into Dawn for me. In the next video, we'll look at how to add a patient from scratch, should you need to.